Hello Pokemon trainers, welcome back to another Pokemon TCG Pocket video here on iStarly TV. So today's video is going to be a little bit different than I normally do. It's going to be more of a deck guide rather than being like a video where I showcase a deck. Like I do a little bit of a deck guide at the beginning and then I play a couple games with it. So in this video, I unfortunately don't really have time to play a couple games and I don't know how long that's going to take, but I still wanted to get a video out and I wanted to actually talk about this deck here. And another reason why I think it's fine to just do a deck guide is this is kind of a deck that people are annoyed by, I guess you could say. Like, this is kind of like, in a lot of ways, one of the variations of the deck that I think most people are familiar with in the current meta as one of the best decks, if not the best deck in the game right now. And again, it's a variation of that, but this is the deck that I used to climb all the way to Ultra Ball. I did not only exclusively use this deck, but I mostly did, and this deck had the most success for me. I had a pretty solid win rate with the deck. So as you can see here, this is Darkrai and Giratina EX without Druddigon. Typically this deck, kind of the variation that is well known amongst all the players, is with Druddigon as well. So you're playing 6 Pokemon, including Druddigon, and you only play Dark Energy. But I saw someone streaming on TikTok playing this deck with just Darkrai and Giratina, and it just looks a lot more consistent. And in playing this deck, it definitely is. It's a really strong deck. And I mean, unsurprisingly, you're playing 2 of the best Pokemon in the game at the moment, and they're both basic Pokemon and they're both EXs, so you don't have to worry about finding their evolutions, you don't have to worry about coin flips or anything like that. You're really just able to kind of sit back and set up with these 2 Pokemon right here. So as for the deck list, we have 1 Potion, double Pokeball, double Cape, double Helmet, double Research, then we have Sabrina and Cyrus, 1 of each, double Leaf, double Pokemon Center Lady, and double Red. So as far as these trainer cards go, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, I say this all the time, but we really do have a wealth of trainers in the game at the moment. So there are a lot of other trainers you could try in this deck. We only have 16 slots after the EX Pokemon, so we really don't have that many options for trainers, although we do have more options for trainers than a lot of other decks in the game right now. And so we want to focus on longevity with items like Cape and Potion, as well as Pokemon Center Lady, as well as Helmet, which is more of an offensive item. And then double Leaf, I think, is really important. If you're playing this deck, even the version with Druddigon, Leaf is extremely important because a lot of the times you'll get to a stage in the game where you will want to retreat your Pokemon. Like maybe you're setting up with Giratina for a while, and then you have a Darkrai in the back with 3 energy on it, so you can start attacking with Darkrai. Maybe your Giratina doesn't yet have enough energy to start attacking, and so Leaf is really helpful there because you can retreat without having to lose any of the energy that you've set up. And of course, I mean, I haven't really talked about the 2 Pokemon themselves, but I think if you've been playing this game a lot in the past few weeks, you know what these Pokemon do. Giratina EX, definitely the breakout card from Shining Revelry, definitely one of the best cards in the game at the moment. It is just capable of setting up by itself. So you can play Giratina in a deck like this where you're not even playing Psychic Energy, you're just playing Dark Energy, and you still can set up with Giratina and eventually just attack, because that last energy, it requires 4 energy to attack. The last energy can be any energy. It does not have to be a Psychic Energy. So you can play Giratina again in non-Psychic decks, which of course is what we're doing here. So if you lead with Giratina, the cool thing about Giratina too is if you have it in your lead spot, like if you're going first, of course, if you're going first, you cannot play energy, but Giratina kind of gets around that, and it is able to put energy onto itself. And then, of course, Darkrai it doesn't set up itself, but once you put energy onto Darkrai, it gets to do damage to the enemy, which is really clutch in this format. It can damage damage Druddigon without taking damage itself. It can weaken Pokemon like Manaphy and Druddigon for that matter. I've seen some Pachirisu, any Pokemon that tries to set up in the beginning, you can get some chip damage, and doing 20 at a time is pretty clutch. And of course, later on with Cyrus, you can kind of pull them right back in after you've damaged them a little bit. And also with Helmet, that's why I like running double Cape and double Helmet, because of course Cape is there to make your Pokemon hit those break points, or rather survive certain break points. Giratina does 130 damage And so if they have red, that's 150, but if you have a cape on your Darkrai, you do survive that because you will have 160 HP. So those breakpoints are actually really important in the game right now, especially because red does exist. And I think that's kind of it as far as, trainers. I'm going to kind of run through other potential options for trainers here. X-Speed is nice because it does not require... It's not a supporter, so you could use X-Speed along with a supporter in your turn. But I think Leaf is just better. X-Speed only reduces it by 1 cost. And again, you just have so many slots in the deck that you want to be fitting. X-Speed just doesn't fit at the moment, unfortunately. Rocket Grunt is also a good option as well. I think Rocket Grunt is... It's pretty good in the meta. If you look at a lot of the decks that are doing really well right now, we have stuff like Charizard EX, the Gyarados EX decks, the Giratina and Darkrai decks. Basically, all of these decks are trying to just put a bunch of energy onto their Pokemon and then just kill you in one big swing. And so Rocket Grunt can really set them back. Also, the Arceus Dialga deck, which I hadn't really seen a lot of until recently. I've run into a couple in more recent games. So there are a lot of decks in the game right now that are just, again, trying to set up a lot of energy onto something. And if you can kind of catch them with Rocket Grunt, which of course does rely on coin flips, it's kind of like the anti-Misty card, that can be amazing for you, and you can really significantly set them back. I've had games where they put an energy on their Dialga, and then the next turn they were going to put a second energy, and they were going to start using Turbo to set up their Metallic Turbo to set up their Arceus on the bench. But I flipped a heads with Rocket Grunt, and it took the energy off of their their Dialga, so that they actually could not attack next turn, and it gave me a huge momentum swing because I was able to progress my game plan, but they were not able to progress theirs. So Grunt is something that you can definitely fit into this deck, and it can be good in a lot of matchups. Of course, there are matchups where it's not very good. Against like the Lucario Rampardos deck, it's not great because Rampardos only needs 1 energy to attack. Against Meowscarada, it's also not amazing because Meowscarada only needs 2 energy, and if you just flip 1 heads, you remove an energy from them, but then they can just put it back the following turn. So Grunt is something where you really need to think about like what situations you'll need it. And of course, a lot of this is meta dependent. If you're playing a lot on the ladder and you realize, oh, I'm facing this deck a lot, I'm facing the Arceus deck a lot, I'm facing the Giratina deck a lot, that might inform, maybe if you're playing a lot of Misty decks, then of course Rocket Grunt becomes a lot better in that case. Dawn is also a consideration. I really like Dawn in Darkrai decks because you can put the energy onto Darkrai and do 20 damage, and then you can move the energy from Darkrai with Dawn. But I think Dawn is typically better in Darkrai decks that are only playing like dark Pokemon, because if you have like 2 energy on your Giratina, you can't really like... With 2 energy on Giratina, you can't play your energy for turn onto Giratina and then Dawn an energy from Darkrai onto Giratina because that's 2 dark energy and Giratina needs 3 psychic and 1 dark. So this is not a deck where Dawn is at her best, but again, she does typically combo pretty decently with Darkrai. Communication is another card that a lot of people are playing these days, but I feel like Communication is at its best when you're playing a lot of evolutions. So Communication is not good in this deck because you're playing a lot of basics. I mean, I guess maybe there might be a case where you have Giratina in hand, but you really want Darkrai. But in that case, I think Pokeball just kind of does what you want anyway, so that's not super necessary. We are playing 1 copy of Red, like I said. You can go up to 2 copies of Red, but I like 1, and Giovanni's another card that you could definitely play as well, because there are a lot of decks that are trying to fight the large influx of EX heavy decks, such as, again, Meowscarada, Rampardos, stuff like that, Magnezone decks, which are, again, decks that can do a lot of damage, but don't play any EX Pokemon themselves. So while Red can be really, really good in these mirror matches, I would advise against playing 2 copies of Red, just because, again, if you're up against a Meowscarada deck and you have 2 Reds in hand, you kind of have 2 cards that do absolutely nothing. Same thing with Rampardos, so it can be a little scary sometimes, and I would say to limit the number of Reds, even though Red can also be extremely clutch. And another couple of options are Iono and Mars. Iono is another card that I've seen and has been pretty good in decks, again, that are really trying to set up an evolution like a Charizard or a Gallade EX or something like that. So in this deck, I don't think Iono is quite as good because we are playing a lot of supporters. Because Iono, I think you only want to use Iono when you're trying to shuffle your own cards. Like if you have 4 cards in hand and you're like, I really, really need Gallade, but I don't have it. That's when you want to fire off Iono. And this is a deck, again, we're playing a lot of supporters anyway, so you're never going to be able to go Iono into like Sabrina in the same turn or Iono into Red in the same turn. So, you know, because we just have so few Pokemon to begin with and they're all basics anyway, they can all be found off of Pokeball. I don't think Iono is useful in this deck, but it is a solid card in the meta overall. It just is very dependent on the decks that you are playing. And then similarly, Mars. Mars is a weird one. I've had Mars played against me, and I've had it be really good. Mars is another consideration. Mars is better than Iono because, again, this is a very aggressive meta. You might run into decks where your opponents are playing EXs, or I think Mars is interesting to consider in this meta if you're playing this deck because your deck is nothing but EX Pokemon. So you know that if your opponent knocks out one of your Pokemon, they'll get 2 points right away. So if you ever use Mars after that, they shuffle their hand and only draw 1 card. So if they have like 4 cards in hand and you Mars them, then you basically reduce their hand just down to 1, which is really crazy and potentially very powerful. So I actually think Mars has a place in this deck more so than a lot of other decks, because sometimes the way the game plan kind of plays out for this deck is you'll lead with, like, maybe you'll have a like 2 Giratinas and a Darkrai in your start. So you'll lead with a Giratina, and then depending on what deck you're up against, like if it's against a pretty aggressive deck that's going to start attacking you somewhat soon, you actually might start setting up the Giratina on the bench first instead of the active Giratina, and then, you know, putting the energy from your energy pool onto your Darkrai as well. And in that case, you can also put a Rocky Helmet or something on your active Giratina, even though you're not putting energy onto it. So it's kind of like discouraging the opponent from attacking you, and if they want to knock it out, they're going to be taking some damage, so that eventually you can just go into your bench Giratina, which is fully set up at that point, or go into your bench Darkrai, which hopefully is fully set up as well, to knock them out and just kind of keep racking stuff like that up, or racking those points up. And that's a case where something like Mars would be really good. You could also go up to 2 potions, maybe trim one of these supporters, maybe possibly train a Pokemon Center Lady, but Pokemon Center Lady has also been really clutch. Once again, as I keep saying, you know, we're playing a ton of supporters here, so any situation where you can kind of get around that and have a similar effect that is not a supporter, as few as those cases are, can really help you. But I don't know, I guess that's it for the deck. I mean, like I said, I wanted to do a little bit more of an in-depth walkthrough, and the upside of this deck is, while not playing Druddigon, you know, obviously it's a little bit of a risk because it means all of your Pokemon are EXs, but that's still fine. You're still in a really good spot because these Pokemon are so powerful and so self-sufficient. So I would say you typically want to lead with a Giratina. Like, typically when I have an opening hand with Giratina and Darkrai, I try to put Giratina first in the active spot because it can set up for itself. It has more HP. You know, it can do more things later on, and Darkrai can kind of chip away at them while preserving its health. But of course, it could also depend on the matchup. So if you're up against a Meowscarada deck, of course, Darkrai is weak to Meowscarada, so you might want to consider how they're starting their game. And maybe in that case, I mean, that's a case where you'd probably want to protect your Darkrai more by putting it on the bench. But again, there's a lot of corner case scenarios. If you're interested, let me know. If a lot of people are interested in watching me play this deck and watching me play a few games, let me know and I will definitely do that. And I can maybe make some changes as I go just to adapt it. Because like I said, this is my most successful deck so far. I just didn't really talk about it yet on the channel or show it in a video because it's like, you know, you see a deck like this and you're like, okay, well, obviously you're doing well with it, or you know, this is a boring. Some people might say like, this is a boring deck. I don't care for super meta decks. So let me know in the comments what you think. If you hate meta decks like this, you can be honest. If you do want to see some gameplay for this deck, I would be happy to show it off because it is very powerful. Or again, if you would just prefer me to feature decks that are a little bit more unconventional or a little bit more like exciting or unique, let me know because I have fun doing that, but I also like winning. So thank you very much for watching. Please leave a like. Please subscribe for more Pokemon TCG Pocket. And of course, let me know in the comments what you think. And I'm looking forward to hearing from how things are going for you. Take care. Have a good one.